in your textbooks is credited with being the first person to make a superconductor with a boiling point above liquid nitrogen. Actually, it wasn't really Paul Chu, it was two other people, Ma Kuan-u and Jim Ashburn. They were too shy to speak in public. They asked Paul Chu, "Paul, we don't want to speak at the conference. Can you please present for us?" Paul Chu presented at the conference. And he told everybody, "This is not my research, it's Jim Ashburn and Ma Kuan-u." Nobody remembers Jim Ashburn or Ma Kuan-u, and everybody only remembers Paul Chu because he presented, because he was the one to talk about it. Another example, Zhenzi Sheng, postdoc student at the University of Arkansas. He discovered another superconductor with an even higher boiling temperature. However, Sheng's English was poor. He was shy speaking English, so he asked the department chairman, Alan Herman. He said, "Can you please speak at the conference for me? My English is too poor." Alan Herman went to the conference. He told everybody, "This is not my research. It's only a student in our department. His English is poor, so I will speak for him." Nobody remembers Sheng. Everybody remembers Alan Herman as being the person to create this. People do judge you by how you speak. People, unfortunately, are shallow. When you speak well about a topic, they assume it's yours and that you did well. If you don't speak, no one knows you, and if you speak poorly, people, again, get a negative look at what you have done. So your speaking skill may determine the impact of your scientific contribution. Thus, it's very important that we learn how to do this well. Now, you've all seen bad conference presentations before. I know I have. I was recently at a conference, and I saw the speaker. She came up to the front. She sat down. Never sit down. If you sit down, it's the beginning of the end. You're finished. She sat down. She opened her paper, and she started to read in a low, dead voice. Unfortunately, people have no patience for that. And as I was sitting in the conference, I saw about 20 people get up and walk out. And when she looked up, it was only me sitting there and the chair. I mean, everybody had left. And I wanted to leave too, but I thought if I leave, then only the chair will be here, and that's, very embarrassing. So I sat there watching her as she kept reading in this dead, monotone voice, using long technical words, which I have no idea what they mean. And then she had terrible timing. Finally, the chair had to kick her out because her time was up. And when the chair kicked her out, she was still reading her literature review. Unbelievable. So here she traveled across the world to talk about somebody else's research. A disaster. Hadn't even gotten to her own results, her own conclusion. We must make sure that our work does not follow that path. Now let's talk about what a good talk must do. Good talk must do two things. First, persuade your audience with evidence. We all know this. But number two, be interesting and entertaining. Here's what we don't often know. It's our job as a speaker to prevent people from going to sleep. That's job number one. Because if you fail in job number one and everyone's sleeping, doesn't matter what a genius you are. They're sleeping. They don't care. So you need to make sure that you are preventing them from sleeping by being at least interesting and stimulating enough to keep them awake. So what do? We talk instead of reading. We stand up. We don't sit down. We move around. We don't stay in the same place. We make eye contact with our audience, and not just one side of the room, the whole room. We look at people. And this is hard sometimes in the beginning. I push students on this because sometimes students are very shy at looking at people, right? And so they look down or they look at the ceiling. In the beginning, here's a good tip, okay? In the beginning, when you're nervous, when you're shy, only look at friendly faces. Only look at friendly, happy, smiley people. And find a couple different smiley people in different sides of the room and keep going between your smiley faces. These people will give you energy. If someone doesn't look happy, don't look at him. He's not here. He's taking away your energy. So, you know, you find a happy face over here. This guy looks friendly. I'll look at him, and then I'll look here, and then, okay, no one over there. I won't look over there. When you go back and forth between your smiley faces, you keep getting this good energy back. Now, when you get more confident, you should look at everybody. But in the beginning, for survival, look at those happy people in different places of the room, and you'll give the feeling that you're looking at everybody, even though you're just looking at a few. Finally, imitate skillful speakers. Imitate means to copy the behavior of skillful speakers. Every time you go to a conference from now on, you're sitting in the session, notice how you behave toward the speaker. Are you interested in the speaker? Why are you interested? What is he doing that attracts you? How can you steal and copy his tricks? Public speaking is something we learn through observing others, observing our own reaction to others. Another way you can test if a speaker is good is look around you and count how many people are sleeping. If everybody's sleeping, it's a bad talk. If most people seem to be awake and some people seem to be interested, well, start listening to the speaker and see what he's doing. Ask yourself how you too can improve your own speaking style by looking at that. Now, why do smart people give poor talks? It's a good question. I think it's because we are very good in academia at writing, right? This is actually what I teach most of the time is writing course, and this is the most practical skill most of the time for scholars. We are good at journal papers, but when we speak, our speaking style is different from writing journal papers in particular. We will use short sentences when we speak. When we write journal papers, we can use a long or complicated sentence. It would be okay. When we speak, we will use the simple, short words. Why? Because if my listener doesn't understand my word, he doesn't have time to get his dictionary and look up the meaning of the word and see what it means, right? If he misses this word, he may miss my sentence. If he misses my sentence, he may miss my whole concept. So we are very concerned while speaking that we use simple, short sentences. Now, sometimes when my students are preparing their speech, they want to know an English word, so they type the Chinese word into the English-Chinese dictionary, right? They put it in one Chinese word, and then they get several English words. A short one, longer one, really, really long one. What do? They take the really, really long one. Why? High quality, they tell me. But this is not why we choose a word. We don't use a long word when we can use a simple short one. We want our sentences to be easily digestible by our audience. We want it to be very easy to understand our concepts, and that's our first job as a speaker, to make sure our audience can follow us. Let me talk about two famous scientists, both of them Nobel Prize winners in different domains. And I want to tell you a little bit about their speaking style. I'm very interested in Nobel Prize winners' speaking style. I've read a lot of their biographies and looked at some of their students' records on their teachers who were speakers. And what's so interesting to me is that great Nobel Prize winning speakers spent a lot of time focused on their speaking skill. Oh my, sometimes years perfecting their arts, because they knew that nobody would appreciate their genius ideas if they couldn't express it well. And I'm going to give you a few examples today of some Nobel Prize winners who were very good at speaking, famous scientists who appreciated how important speaking was for their career. And we'll see what we can learn from these speakers. Now, I want to start with two Nobel Prize winners, one very famous as a great speaker and one very famous as a poor speaker. Easy to lose him, very, very hard to listen to. Now, my example of a good speaker is Volhard. Volhard won her work for genetics, right? And she's a very good speaker. Both of these, by the way, both of these scientists are non-native English speakers. Both of them learned English later in their life. Volhard is still a fantastic speaker today, a wonderful teacher. And I'm going to give you examples from the beginning of both of their Nobel Prize accepting speeches, okay? both of the speeches when they won the Nobel Prize, and we can see a strong difference between Bohr and Volhard, and we'll be able to learn some principles of effective scientific presentation from these famous scientists. Let's take a look at Bohr's Nobel Prize winning speech. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is this is only one sentence right here, okay? One sentence. We like short sentences, not long sentences. That is an important rule we'll bear in mind. Second thing, when I'm reading his speech, I want you to notice that Bohr loves to use nouns, and he doesn't use verbs. That's a very important principle. Whenever we have a choice between using a noun and a verb, we always choose the verb because we know we'll be alive, we'll be shorter. Nouns are dead and they slow us down. And whenever we use a noun, we must also use a preposition of, on, by, through, in. And it becomes difficult to remember what is on what is by what is through what when we have all of these nouns in long sentences. So here's Bohr's first sentence. He says, "Today, as a consequence of the great honor the Swedish Academy of Sciences has done me in awarding me this year's Nobel Prize for Physics for my work on the structure of the atom, it is my duty to give an account of the results of this work, and I think I shall be acting in accordance with the traditions of the Nobel Foundation if I give this report in the form of a survey of the development which has taken place in the last few years within the field of physics to which this work belongs." Here is his second sentence. "The present state of atomic theory is characterized by the fact that we not only believe the existence of atoms to be proved beyond a doubt, but we also even believe that we have an intimate knowledge of the constituents of the individual atom. I cannot on this occasion give a survey of the scientific developments that have led to this result. I will only recall the discovery of the electron toward the close of the last century, which furnished the direct verification and led to the conclusive formulation of the conception of the atomic nature of electricity, which had evolved since the discovery by Faraday of the fundamental laws of electrochemical theory and its creative triumph in the electrolyte dissociation theory of Archimedes." Really hard to get on it's difficult. You notice all those nouns are just killing us. The verification to the conclusive formulation of the conception. It's just, wow. It's really difficult to follow. Now I want to contrast Bohr. Well, first of all, let's hear what Einstein has to say about Bohr. Einstein says, "Bohr states his opinion like one always groping, perpetually, always groping means reaching, and never like one who believes himself to be in possession of truth." So Einstein thinks because Bohr takes so long to get to his point, he looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about, is what Einstein's saying. This style really hurts his credibility, according to Einstein. Now let me take a look at Volhard, Christine Volhard, her beginning of her Nobel Prize winning speech. I want to contrast this with Bohr. I want you to see how in Volhard's speech, first, she uses short sentences. That's great. She uses verbs. Also notice her scope begins very general and moves slowly down to the particular topic that she wants to talk to us about. She makes sure to baby step us from a very general life of animals down to the particular area of her biological research, all right? Notice how she does this. She uses few technical words. She tries to keep it as general and easy as she can. She's a very smart lady. Obviously, she could talk over all of our heads if she wanted to, but she doesn't want to, right? Because she's speaking. Her job is to talk to us and lead us gently along, and she knows if she loses us, she failed as a speaker. So, she doesn't. She begins. "In the life of animals, complex forms alternate with simple ones. An individual develops from a simple one-celled egg that bears no resemblance on the complex structure and pattern displayed in the juvenile and adult form. The process of embryonic development, with its highly ordered increase in complexity, accompanied by perfect reproducibility, is controlled by a subset of the animal genes." Now that's a long sentence. The next one's very short. "Animals have a large number of genes. The exact number is not known for any multicellular organism, nor is it known how many and which are required for the development of complexity, pattern, and shape during embryogenesis." Here's her first technical word, embryogenesis. But it's not very technical. We can figure that out. Embryo, egg, genesis, beginning, even we non-technical people will be able to catch what she's saying. To identify these genes and to understand their research, their functions, is a major issue in biological research. You see how she came gently down from the life of animals, using short sentences and good verbs down to her particular topic that she wants to talk with us about. She didn't just jump into the complexities of her area. No, she took time to baby step us slowly there. She used something we call familiarity, which is an important principle when we talk to an academic audience. You always know more about your specific area than your audience does. You spent years studying this. You must be careful to lead your audience there based on what they already know. We have to start with where they are before we take them where we want to go. If we jump in too deep, too soon, our audience will be swimming alone in the sea in the dark and have no idea where we are or what we are doing. And some other examples of scientists who use, let me talk about, first of all, some very successful scientific presenters. I have them into three groups here. The first group of scientific presenters, Boltzmann, Einstein, Feynman, Maltosini, and Pauling. These scientists were absolutely fantastic speakers through their entire career. We never have a record of a bad speech from them. They were their students' favorite teacher. They were top university professors as teachers in their faculty. They were terrific throughout their career. They were just wonderful. Now, the second group is kind of interesting. That's Hertz, Oppenheimer, and Wu. These scientists began their career as very poor speakers, but realized early in their career that they would never be successful as scientists until they learned to speak. They, in many cases, dropped out of research, practiced their speaking skill to improve later in their careers. After they became great speakers, they achieved success within their academic careers. The last one is also very interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about her, Marie Curie. Marie Curie, throughout her whole career, suffered from the social anxiety disorder. She was very afraid of people all the time. But yet, even with this terrible social fear, she forced herself to speak twice a week, every week, because she knew it was so critical to the success of her research. She did not allow this very real problem that she had to stop her. And I'm going to give you an example from her daughter's diary, talking about her mother and this horrible disorder that her mother had. And yet, again, she didn't let her stop her. My point is this. If Nobel Prize winners, with their great knowledge and ability, believe that public speaking is important, it's much more important for those of us without a Nobel Prize. It's much more important for those of us who don't have this exceptional skill to become good speakers. If they think it's important, it certainly is important for us as well. If with their great results they also emphasize this so much, we should emphasize it even more in our own work to get it recognized and appreciated. If an atom were the size of a bus, the nucleus would be like the dot on this eye. Now notice how he's using the concept of familiarity that we already talked about, right? He can tell me how many microns or whatever, but I don't know that. I know bus. I know dot on an eye. He's connecting to what I already know, right? He's using the examples in my mind to emphasize what he wants to talk about. It's a good technique as a speaker. Obviously, he's bringing the knowledge down as far as he can to the level of his audience. Einstein, one of his students said, tell me the likelihood of producing nuclear energy with alpha particles striking nitrogen nuclei. He said, if you go outside at nighttime with a gun and shoot in the air, if you hit a bird, that's the probability. Again, he could tell us more specifically, but he used examples that, again, students would understand. Or Fred Schutting, when he was describing his work with turbine blades in gas turbine engines, he said, the amount of power produced by a single gas turbine blade equals that of a Maserati sports car. All right? Students know Maserati sports car. They can imagine in their mind, again, how much energy is in each of those blades. I want to talk about Linus Pauling with you for a moment. because he is such a very, very interesting man and a wonderful speaker. So wonderful. Here is Isaac Asimov, who you probably know, also himself a famous scientist and wrote over 100 books. Many of them are science fiction movies today, like I, Robot, for example. I don't know if you saw that. That's Asimov's book, and there are many others. Asimov wrote a book about why he became a scientist and science fiction writer, and he said it was Pauling. Pauling's presentation was what inspired him to start. Here's from his book. He says, on March 21, 1949, I attended a lecture by Linus Pauling. That Pauling was the best talk by anyone on any subject I have ever heard. The talk was more than a talk for me. It filled me with a desire of my own to become a speaker. Here's another scientist talking about Pauling. Pauling was his teacher. He's describing Pauling's teaching style and what made Pauling so interesting. He says, Pauling's talk was made with his usual dramatic flair. Lots of drama. The words came out as if he was in show business all his life. All right. A curtain kept his model hidden until near the end of his lecture, when he proudly unveiled his latest creation. Then, with his eyes twinkling or full of light, Linus explained the specific characteristics that made his model, the alpha helix, uniquely beautiful. Even if he were to say nonsense, his mesmerized students would never know because of his unquenchable self-confidence. So, here's the student who says, he can tell us any garbage and we will believe anything. Because he's so good at speaking, because he's so confident at presenting. Let me talk about Feynman, for example. Feynman, wonderful physicist. Actually, I'm in the middle of reading his book right now, which is really, really good. I encourage all of you to read it. He's a funny, very interesting man. An extremely popular teacher at Caltech. If you wanted to take Feynman's class, I mean, he's not teaching now, but if you had wanted to take his class, it's very hard to take it, because in Feynman's physics class, all of the seats were taken, and all of the rows were taken with people sitting there. Even in the front, people were sitting, and Feynman only has a small place to stand. Most of the people in the audience are not actually students. They're the other teachers in Caltech. They love listening to him so much because he can explain these very complicated physics principles in simple, easy ways. That was Feynman's genius, of course, is that he could present something that was extremely complicated in a very simple way. Here is Goldstein, another professor there at Caltech, talking about Feynman and why he was a good teacher. He says, Feynman absolutely riveted the attention of everyone in the room for the entire time he was there. This lies close to the core of what made him a great teacher. For Feynman, the lecture hall was a theater, and the lecturer a performer, responsible for providing drama and fireworks, as well as facts and figures. This was true regardless of his audience, whether he was talking to undergrads, graduates, his colleagues, or the general public. So here's a very serious, very famous scientist who is providing drama and fireworks, who is interesting, and this is what makes him a good teacher, according to his colleague. He continues, but even when he thought he was explaining things to freshmen and sophomores, it was not always they who benefited most from what he was doing. It was us, scientists, physicists, professors, who would be the main beneficiaries of his magnificent achievement, which was nothing less than to see all of physics with fresh, new eyes. So he said, we other scientists sure appreciated it too. Not just the students, but the other professionals, the other teachers, the other scientists. Sometimes we finally understand physics for the first time because we had explained to us well in a simple, familiar way by someone who deeply understood his topic. Let me talk for a minute about Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was in charge of the Manhattan Project and was nominated for four times for the Nobel Prize. He never won, but he remained a great scientist. And he started teaching at Berkeley in 1929. He was very young, only 25 years old. but he was already famous for his work in quantum theory. In Oppenheimer's first semester, there were 60 students in his class, very excited to hear him. Oppenheimer didn't know how to talk in public, and at the end of the semester, only one student survived. 59 left the class. Oppenheimer, his feelings were hurt. Nobody likes him. So he doesn't know what to do, but Oppenheimer thought, I need to learn to speak in public. So Oppenheimer did something very interesting. Oppenheimer was very smart from a young age. Basically, he's been reading scientific journals since he was 12. So he doesn't really know how normal people talk or how his students will listen. So he goes to the pubs and he goes to the student gatherings with a notebook to write down the words that they use. He wants to learn their vocabulary, and he writes down little stories that they will laugh at and jokes that they will use. And he develops his own special style of mixing the very casual English that everybody understands with the complicated idea and great stories. And he practices this, and then he became the most popular professor in UC Berkeley. So it does work. If we take the time, we can overcome our challenges in this area. We can get better at speaking. Oppenheimer is a very good example of that. I did something a little similar when I first came to Taiwan 11 years ago. My first class at the university, I remember, I was talking and students didn't really understand me. I would say something and they would look at me strangely or go to sleep. And I realized that the English that I thought was simple was not really simple. Obviously, and this is an interesting thing because when I came to Taiwan, what we think as native speakers is simple English may or may not be simple English. Students know some words that I am amazed that they know, and other words that I think everybody should know they don't know. There's this kind of gaps there in the vocabulary. So I went and I got all the junior high textbooks for Taiwan, and I read what words do they know. You've been listening to me today, and you probably understand most of what I say, right? Probably 80–90% of what I say you can understand, and it's because I know the words you know, and I'm just looking for words. But again, this is part of what our responsibility is as speakers, is to use the vocabulary and language and examples that our students or our audience is more likely to use. And this is particularly important at a conference. Let's talk practically about 10 things we can do to increase our confidence the next time we go to a conference. First, expect to be nervous. Everybody is, not just Marie Curie. We all suffer from fear. It's one of the most natural fears we have. Psychologists tell us that when we separate ourselves from the group can see me, identify my flaws, criticize, analyze me. I feel safer to mix in with everybody else. They did a survey of American university students. In fact, they do the same survey every year. And they asked the students, what is your number one fear? And every year, the number one fear of American university students has been the fear of speaking in public. Fear number 2 is the fear of dying under the water. Our fear of presentation is greater than our fear of death. It's an irrational fear, but we all have it, and we have to understand it. We have to know what's going to be there. So what can we do to overcome this fear? Well, number 1, prepare. When I say prepare, I mean don't write down every word and read it 500 times and try to memorize it. That's a disaster. I'll tell you why it's a disaster. You go, you prepare, you stand up, and you start remembering all the words, and then one word is missing, and the whole thing is gone. And you're standing there looking like an idiot. Much safer, prepare an outline. An outline are some simple key points that are connected to ideas and examples in your mind. And when you practice your speech, do not focus on the particular words, but on the particular ideas, the sequence of those ideas, and use new words every time. And you will seem like you're talking to your audience and not remembering something from space. It will be far easier to understand you when you don't memorize than when you do. Throw out those notes. Start talking to your audience like humans. They will appreciate it. The other problem with the memorized speech, let's say you come into your conference presentation and the chair says, I know we had 20 minutes, but actually we only have time for 15. Good luck. You can't adjust it because you only memorized one speech, right? There's no way to modify the length of time. Or let's say you come in and the audience is different from what you expected. You were expecting all professors, but they're all students. You can't change your speech because you just memorized the one speech. But when you have the outline, you have flexibility for time, for types of words, for the type of content. So again, go with the outline. The other way takes a long time to prepare and high risk of failure. Practice all the time, everywhere you can. Every time you get an opportunity to speak in front of people, take that opportunity. Public speaking is not a skill that you can go home and read a book and know how to do. It's a skill we have to do to learn. Thus, every time you get a chance, raise your hand, volunteer, get in front of audiences, English or Chinese. Actually, if you can speak well in Chinese, some of that confidence will be transferable to English. Just take every chance you can to get in front of anybody you can. Breathe. You'd think you would remember this, but people do forget this. Especially when they're nervous. They will speak like this and they just in the beginning, it's probably a good idea to put breathing marks in your notes. Students will breathe here, because otherwise you do forget, and it's hard to remember where the natural breathing place is. Rehearse. Rehearse means to practice with timing. Practice exactly the speech, not just practice in general, practice the particular speech that you're planning to do. Use a timing device like PowerPoint tools or a stopwatch so you know how long 15 minutes feels like. Then you can get your timing better. You know how much time you have. If you don't practice this, very likely you'll either be much too short or way too long. Either way, it's not going to be an accident that your timing's right. So you're going to need to practice, rehearse with a timer to make sure you have the timing right. Focus on your audience. Particularly, remember your audience are not all native English speakers. They're not all from Taiwan either. That means what? We use the simple, short words, short sentences. We are trying hard to use the easiest way we can to communicate our idea. Of course we know more. Of course we could be complicated. Of course we could lose everybody, but what would be the point of that, right? We are there to be understood. Thus, we must make sure that our speech is understandable. Short, simple words. Simplify. This is related to what we talked about before. We use simple examples if we can. In addition to our vocabulary, we try to reduce the complexity of our content. We avoid using those technical words. Jargon, we call it. What is jargon? Jargon are words that you know in your lab, but nobody else knows. That's jargon, okay? The other day, my student brought me his speech. I still remember the speech title was Using the RBGW minimum method to reduce CBU. That was his title. I said, what does that mean? He said, everybody knows what that means. I said, nobody knows what that means. You know what that means in your laboratory, but outside of the laboratory, we have no idea what it means. We will avoid using that jargon, particularly in titles, because we haven't had a chance to describe that yet. Picture success. Sometimes students kill themselves before their speech because they think of everything that can go wrong. They think, what if I go into the speech and I forget a word and it all disappears, and then somebody in the audience starts laughing at me, and then someone else starts throwing tomatoes at my head. It's a disaster. But what are they doing? They are practicing failure. And they practice failure so much that when they speak, they fail. Not a big surprise. When we think about our speech, before our speech, we think about everything going right. We think about our audience not sleeping, or most people not sleeping. We think about people nodding their head, understanding. We think about people clapping when we finish. We imagine success, and this thought is strengthening us. This thought is giving us confidence that we need before we go to our speech. Connect with your audience. We're talking here about eye contact. We've mentioned that a little bit before. We look at people in the eye because people trust people who look them in the eye. If you look at the ceiling, people think you're hiding something, you're lying. We smile. Smiling is the easiest way to get people to like you, or at least not hate you. It's a great way to create goodwill. So we smile all the time because we know that our audience will smile back, respond well back as well. We use gestures as well to create goodwill. We have gestures away from the body, broad gestures. If you're too close to the body, you look like you have problems. People worry about you. But when you use those broad gestures, people like to see movement. They like to see, we're going to talk about that a little bit later after our break. We will, finally and most importantly, pretend to be confident. This is the single best thing you can do if you want to be confident. If you want to be confident, pretend you already are. Why does this work? Well, there's a connection between our feeling and our action. Our feeling and our action are connected. We know this is true. For example, if you go outside and you see a hungry bear, you feel afraid, your body will shake, right? My feeling, fear, is influencing my action to shake. But what we don't always realize is that this is a two-way connection. Not only does your feeling influence your action, but your action can also change and influence your feeling. Professor William James, 1893, behavioral modification theory, still fundamental in psychology today. He pointed out this connection. So what does this mean? It means when you feel afraid, you can change that feeling by behaving like you are already brave, like you are already confident. When we come up to speak, we pull ourselves to our full height. We look people in the eye and we pretend they owe us money. This brave action, this pretending will give us confidence. Or we can slow down. Or we can even stop. For a while. And then continue. In fact, this is the best way to get people to listen. If you talk louder, they sleep deeper. If you want people to really pay attention to what you're saying, then just stop talking. People wake up, they say, "What's wrong?" Then you got them back again. It's one of the best ways to add energy to your talk. Use the pause. Great way to keep people interested. Second way that you can get your audience interested is using tone. You can speak in a high tone or you can speak low. High and low tone mean different things. The high tone will indicate emotion and feeling and intensity, and the low tone indicates authority and power. People don't doubt low tone as much as high tone. So you can use both. You should use both in your speech. You can use the low tone when you don't want people to doubt the validity of what you're saying, like your results, for example. These are my results. If you say, "These are my results," are they really your results? I have a question. I have a student now in my NTU class. She's a very nice girl. But every time she has a sentence, she ends it higher. "Hello, my name is Jenny, and these are my results. And we think, is your name really Jenny? We doubt her because she seems to doubt herself. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let your tone kill the credibility of your sentence, particularly at the end of the sentence. Drop that tone down lower so people won't doubt you. Now, the high tone is also useful as well, as we said, to create the intensity and the emotion in your speech. A good example of this is Martin Luther King Jr. You know Martin Luther King Jr.? Did a famous speech, I have a dream, right? If you ever listen to that speech, and I play that in my speaking class, what's so interesting about this speech is that it is so high. It starts high and then it goes higher. If that's I have a dream, I have a dream, and the whole crowd is just going crazy. He uses no low tone at all. And the reason is he wants the strong emotion, he wants the intensity. His purpose is to do that, and his tone helps him a lot. Now, as persuasive speakers, as speakers in the conference, we will use the full range of our voice, high to low, to high to low. What we don't do is use the monotone. Hello, my name is Steve. Today I will talk to you about public speaking. Your eyes are feeling very heavy. You will put people to sleep if you use that monotone. So again, use the full range, high and low. Final way you can use your voice's volume. You can speak in a loud voice, or you can speak softly. Sometimes this is a great way to get people's attention. You can just whisper your key point. And people will say, why is he whispering? You can't do this too long because people will get tired of it. But for the dramatic pause or for the dramatic key point, you can use a soft voice. Yesterday, actually, in my Jiao Da class, one student did this very, very well. I was so impressed. She said, and here's the key point. Are you listening? And we're I was so proud of her. She used the tone, the volume very well, again, to create some drama in her presentation. First thing about PowerPoint, don't write everything and read it. We are not coming to hear reading of your work. If all you can do is read, just send us the PowerPoint, save our time, so we don't go there and listen to you. The speaker adds more value than only information. If our whole value was only information, we could save a lot of time today if I emailed you these slides, right? We could. But as speakers, we do a lot more than that. We hope to inspire our audience to continue on. We hope with our enthusiasm we'll encourage our audience to listen more, to read more, to continue on after we're finished. That's our value as a speaker, not just the information itself. And that's why we have the two goals. We give evidence to persuade, but we also must be interesting and entertaining. And that second part is something that we as speakers do. So we don't just read our slides, no. Now, PowerPoint can be helpful to clarify ideas, emphasize key points, show relationships, or provide visual information to make sure the audience understands. But PowerPoint should not replace you. And I see PowerPoint replacing speakers very often. And it's a disaster. And let me just mention, too, that today PowerPoint has been so overused and abused that people ignore it easily. I see this all the time. I see PowerPoint turn on and everybody turns off. It's amazing. I will go to conferences, I'll look around, and the PowerPoint goes on, and the little sound, and everyone, they're preparing for deep sleep. PowerPoint has that strong reaction, so be very careful about your PowerPoint. Don't let it get too powerful, or you will be gone. Your whole speech will be ruined. So let me talk a little bit more about it. Slides should be short. 6 lines is enough, 9 is a lot, 12 can become unreadable. I know I broke my rule today earlier when I gave you the long quotations from the books, but I had to. Most of the time we will try to keep them fewer lines in our PowerPoint. Let's talk about font size. You see this is 72, 36, 24. 24 is the smallest one you will go. any smaller than 24 and people are using binoculars to see what is on your PowerPoint, that's about as small as we will go. Let's talk about different styles of font. English has two categories of font. We have what we call the serif font, and we have what we call sans serif. What does serif mean? Serif is an Arabic word. It means feet. Feet. Do you see the Times font? Do you see the little feet on the bottom of the T, and the I, and the top of the T? That's called serif. Studies show that serif font is 30% faster to read in a book. We actually like those little serifs. It helps us go faster. But when we project on a screen, those feet become fuzzy, and we prefer the sans serif, or no feet font, like the Helvetica here, right here, the top one. We like a wide sans serif font, like Arial or Helvetica. You see how the Arial narrow is a little harder to read because it's stuck together more. We like, again, that wider sans serif font because we know it's going to be faster to read. Choosing a color. We want high contrast color. Now, yellow and black have the highest contrast, but it's too much for our PowerPoint. Personally, I suggest you use the light-colored background with the dark text like I have in my PowerPoint. Why do I say that? Because today I walk into this room. I have no idea about this room. I've never been in this room before. I don't know how much light will be shining on my screen. Often, and this room is a good example, look at the light, it's so close to the screen. If I have a dark background and light text, you won't be able to see this. It'll be very hard for you to read. So your most flexible option for any kind of lighting condition is that light cream colored background with the dark text. That way you know you have the greatest flexibility. Whatever type of environment that you go into, it's more likely to be able to read under any types of different lighting. Don't put red and green together because 10% of people are colorblind and won't see anything. So we will avoid those Christmas colors together. And also we'll avoid writing in red text, also hard to read. Let's talk for a minute about charts for presenting our work. What kind of chart can we use to graphically display our work? If you're trying to decide a chart to use, the first thing you need to do is find the verb, that's the action word, the action statement, that will best describe what is happening in your results. Increasing, decreasing, growing. When you find your verb, then you need to write a sentence, an action sentence using that verb, so that your reader will be able to look into your chart and see the action that you want him to see. Growing, decreasing, trend, ranks, compares. Some verb is what you need. When you have the verb, then you can use your chart. And when you have the keyword grow, decline, or trend, you know that you're showing the change over time and you need a line chart, right? Line chart is for showing change over time. If you have a keyword in your action sentence, ranks, compares, highest, lowest, most, then you know you are comparing items at just one point in time and you need the bar chart. If you have a keyword in your action statement, percentage, portion, share, you know you are comparing parts of a whole and you need the pie chart. And if you see the keyword country, area, then you know you are comparing data by geographic location and you need the segmented bar chart, which is different from the bar chart. Segmented bar chart is always 100%, right? But the values will change within the 100% depending on area or year. Whatever you do with your PowerPoint, don't get too technical. Sometimes I see students putting in a lot of animation and cute pictures, but the more technical your PowerPoint is, the more technical problems you will have with your PowerPoint. And it is not fun to try to fix your computer in front of 50 people in the middle of the conference because your video is not working or some animation isn't working. You've all seen this before. In fact, don't use video, really, unless you absolutely have to. I've been keeping some informal statistics in my class. Every time a student says, here's my video, I will take out my notebook and say, does it work or not? let me tell you your chance of working. About 50% chance of working. It's not very good. Something's always going to fail. The color's bad, compatibility issue. Like if you make your video on PC and then you try to use it on an Apple, for example. PC and Apple say they can work together. They are lying. Never works. Always some issue with that. So just keep it very non-technical, like my presentation, and then you can sleep at night because you know your PowerPoint's going to work under all conditions which you can predict. If you see an error in your PowerPoint, don't apologize for it. Don't draw attention to it. In fact, this is a good rule in general for public speaking. Never say you're sorry. Sometimes I see students come up and they begin to apologize. They say, sorry, I'm not really prepared. Sorry, my English is poor. Sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about. Sorry. And the audience just says, please go away. Don't waste our time, right? When you say that you're bad, people believe you. Don't say you're bad. Especially don't apologize for poor English. Don't say my English is poor. If your English is poor, people already know it. You don't have to tell them. just keep going with your Buy a laser pointer and mouse. Now, miracle, this just started. Can you believe it? I've been trying this whole speech and now it's working. It saw its name. And this is extremely useful because you never know when you go to the conference what kind of remote they're going to give you. And you don't want to be stuck behind here like me today, hitting the space bar. It's no fun. And you don't want to be running back and forth hitting the space bar. It's just too much exercise. So when you have a laser pointer, then you can move around the room. You see this? Isn't this great? And then you can move your PowerPoint or you can point to something. If you don't bring your own, the conference will give you one, and it will be very complicated. It will look like a TV remote control. You're trying to figure out how to use it, and it's just mafan. You know, you can't think it. Bring your own, practice with your own, simple one, jian dan, and then you know where the buttons are. You don't have to think about anything, and you'll feel more confident when you're there at the conference. The last thing on your PowerPoint should be your website, your URL. That will be the last thing on my PowerPoint today, too. I'll show you how I did it. Now, attention. People think, wow, it must be interesting. If other people are interested, it must be interesting. They start to tune in. It creates interest in the audience. It gets feedback for your own ideas and how to improve your own paper. It makes points easy to remember for the audience. It gets interaction between the audience. Audience can talk to audience during Q&A. And also promotes new thoughts, both in you and in the audience. So it's very valuable. And let me also just say something. You should consider questions to be an honor to you as a speaker. Boring questions make people sleep deeply and then leave quickly. Good presentations keep people awake. They ask questions afterward. It's a compliment. It's a compliment. But this is a special thing I think about Taiwan culture, actually. You don't like to ask questions in the class. I've been here for 11 years. I've done speeches at over 109 universities in Taiwan, and I almost never get questions. And I don't think it's because people don't like my talk. I hope it's because people don't like I think it's because people are shy about it, and people here ask you their real question during the break or after class. You know, this is, which is fine. I understand how it works here. But what I'm trying to prepare you for is, when you go to the international conference, they will ask you questions, and they won't think that they're attacking you. They're just going to think that they're interested, and that's why they're asking you the questions. So you needn't feel like it's an attack, necessarily. It might be, but most of the time it's not. And so we need to be prepared for it and actually encourage it. Encourage it, because it's a compliment. We want to encourage questions. What are some ways that we can encourage questions and answers? Well, let's just talk about how we prepare for Q&A first. How can you get ready for Q&A so you're more prepared when you go? First, you can prepare for Q&A by telling your ideas to a critical friend. You know the guy that you don't really like because he's always criticizing you, and he's always talking and asking questions. He's useful now. Tell him your idea, listen to his criticism, and you can start writing answers or responses to those. Bring a list of references. Sometimes students worry. They say, what if I go to the conference and someone asks me about a paper, a date, a name of some previous research, and I can't remember the guy's name and the name of the paper, a good thing to do is just copy your references from your paper, fold it up, put it in your pocket, and you go in there. Someone does ask you about it, you can take it out, you can read it to him. That's fine. Then you don't have to worry about it. And even if you don't use it, you'll still feel safe. You know, it's like having the gun. Even if you don't need it, you have it there. If someone does ask you, you can pull it out, you can read the reference to him. Take notes on questions and suggestions. Write down what they say, because you'll forget it later on, and you want to make sure that you have something there. Don't be afraid to say you don't know the answer. You know, it's okay to not know the answer to all these questions, particularly because in research, we have a very narrow scope, right? We can't solve all the world's problems in one paper. And sometimes people will ask us things that are way beyond the scope of what we ever intended to do. Don't feel like you have to answer all those. It's okay to say you don't know, or that it's beyond the scope of what you were trying to do here in the paper. However, you can't say this every time. You can't say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, thank you, goodbye. So we're going to have to say something. But you can, on occasion, say that you don't know. That's all right. It's a good emergency option for you. And as I already mentioned, you can save some backup slides to answer the questions that you think, to use questions in your own talk. Like in your title, why knowledge management and why now? This is what we call a rhetorical question. It means you don't expect someone will answer it. You don't expect people, I know the answer, I know. You don't really, that's not going to happen. But we ask them because we want to get our audience thinking of us, engaging, interacting with us mentally before Q&A, so we're more likely to get questions during the Q&A. And all of that's good because, again, you're starting to talk to your audience even before your Q&A. You're creating that interaction with them, which will be important and valuable for you. Bring up questions you have been asked by other audiences. You could say, another audience asked me this question. That's good because they realize it's okay to ask questions. Other people did it, we can do it too. It gets them thinking that questions are acceptable here in this type of an audience. Let the audience know in the beginning there is a Q&A session. When and how long? We're going to have a Q&A session for 3 minutes at the end of this speech. If you have a question, please prepare it. People are thinking, okay, you know, they know that it's okay to ask questions. Provide a seating arrangement where the audience can see each other. If people can see each other, it's much more likely they'll talk to you. In this type of seating environment, for example, we call this classroom seating. It's unlikely anyone would talk to me because you can't really see each other. You can see me, but you can't look behind you or to the side of you, so you feel a little insecure. Now, if we changed it to more of a circle shape, we'd have a lot more interaction. If you look at the most interactive classrooms in the world, for example, in England, they have those circles, and they're on top of each other, and their teacher's like in a hole in the ground. And the students can see each other on different levels, and their teacher in the ground, and they're always shouting at each other. It's very interactive because, again, they can look at the other audience members. So anytime you can get people to look at each other, your interaction is going to increase a lot. List questions in the presentation announcement or brochure. Even before they go, start asking them questions. They'll start thinking of answers and more questions to ask you. You can provide a whiteboard for the audience to write the question at any time. Maybe you put a whiteboard over there. They can write down their questions. You can begin by answering those questions at the end of your speech. You could pass out paper for the audience to write the questions and give it to you. Don't ask for questions and then start to pack up. Sometimes I see questions, putting the laptop away. People don't think you're really serious about it because you don't look like you want them. Here's a little dirty trick. Arrange for someone in the audience to ask the first question. This works well when you're at a conference. Have your other PhD friend ask you a question, and you know, any questions? Yes, I have a question. Yes, sir, what's your name? He asks them. You already know the question and the answer. You're already prepared. But the nice thing about doing this is that it's always most difficult to get the first question. After the first question, the second one's easy, but the first one's the killer. So if we can get over the first one with our friend, then we're more likely to get the second, third one that we'll need to finish up our Q&A. Ask yourself what questions you hope no one asks and prepare to answer them. If you're prepared for the worst question, then you feel more confident to handle any questions, and that confidence will be shown to your audience. Your audience will feel that you actually want their questions. You'll look more confident. You'll encourage them to ask you more if you prepare for the worst one that you can imagine. Why do people ask questions? Let me go through this. Because I want you to know that there are some questions that you should not answer because you'll only lose if you do. Let's talk about the motivation of questioners, and at what point do we not need to answer the question. First, people ask questions because they want to know the answer. This is a good reason, and of course we will answer that type of question. It's probably the most common reason why people ask questions, and we are prepared. We'll answer as best we can. Because they want to make a point. That's fine. I appreciate your point. Thank you for sharing with everybody. This is, again, very useful for everyone. To impress the audience. They want to show everybody that they are very smart, maybe smarter than you. That's also fine with me. You're very smart, smarter than me. Thank you. We're okay. To see if you know the answer. Okay, now we're getting a little bit darker because they know the answer and they're testing you to see if you know. And you probably have no choice. Pretend to be confident. Do your best. If you're wrong, they will correct you. They're probably asking you to show everyone how smart they are when they get the right one. I had a student recently. She was at a conference, and she did something very smart. The questioner asked a question, and it was clear from the way he asked the question that he already knew the answer. You know, it was clear. And so she, being very smart, she says, "That's a great question. What do you think?" He immediately answered. You know, no need to go through the pain of trying to do it yourself. You could try something like that as well. To see how you handle questions and stress. Here, they're just pushing you to see if you will sweat. They're just pushing you because they can. Again, a little darker still. Not everybody's so nice. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to try to answer. Do the best you can, even in this situation. The next one, I recommend you don't answer. To attack your methodology. Here's why I don't think you should answer methodology questions. Number one, you can't answer a methodology question in 3-minute Q&A. It's just too complicated. It takes too long. Methodology questions are usually very involved and a lot of detail. Number two, nobody else in your audience cares about this question except this guy. So when you answer this question, everybody else will be bored. You're going to lose them, and you're going to lose any other chance for anyone else to ask a question. So honestly, I suggest that you say, "Sir, that's a wonderful question. I would love to hear your feedback on that, but it's a bit involved. Could you please see me after?" Smile, look away. Next question. You can do it. You can do it. Don't get sidetracked. It's going to be another speech if you have to try to answer that question. You don't have time for another speech without using the next guy's time. He's going to hate you for that. Cut those short. Those methodology ones in particular are likely to be unanswerable in a short period of time, which is all you have for Q&A. To make you look bad. Sometimes people ask questions because they are competing with you for a job or for whatever reason, or sometimes just personal attack. They don't like you for whatever reason. Now, in these last two examples, to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart, and that is, how can we present our work, our research, at an academic conference so that people will appreciate and acknowledge all the hard work that we did? How can we present our work only using English well, so again, we don't look bad when we go to the international conference? Now, this is a topic that I've been teaching here in Taiwan for the last 11 years, Qingda, Jiaoda, and now Taida as well, to PhD students who need to attend conferences. They need to present their work. And a big reason why we go to conferences is we know that conferences are a first step toward publishing our paper. At a conference we can get in our domain. We have a chance to meet them and buy them a Janju Naicha so they like us. all of these are wonderful opportunities we get at the conference, but we won't be able to take advantage of these opportunities if we do a bad job with our presentation. So today we're going to give you just a few tips on how to get ready for your own presentation when you go to the conference. Let me just see if I can get my PowerPoint working.